I call on Deputy MaryLouMcDonald.
Taoiseach, workers are worse off today because of your budget. They're in shock and disbelief. What you delivered yesterday abandons and betrays working people to look after those at the top. You say that your budget was about protecting the economy, but you've pulled the rug from under the very people who are the engine of that economy. People who get up early in the morning, put in hard shifts every day, who under incredible pressure from the cost of living keep the show on the road. I'm talking about teachers, SNAs, young electricians and carpenters, retail workers, factory workers. In the budget, they were looking for help to keep their heads above water, looking for a break, but they're shaking their heads in disbelief this morning because there was absolutely nothing for them in what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael served up yesterday. You, of course, were able to find money to give tax breaks to developers and landlords, but you couldn't find the money to help those who keep this country going. Your raft of broken election promises mean that working people are left behind. No help with the cost of living. The largest tax cuts package in the history of the state, but no break on income tax for ordinary people. No cut to USC. Energy credits withdrawn as households face big electricity hikes. No increase in the renters' credit. No action to deliver affordable childcare. No increase in child benefit. Petrol and diesel prices hiked up from today. Student fees hiked up by €500. And working people are left scratching their heads. After a budget of €9.4 billion, they ask, how can they be left worse off today than they were yesterday? I wonder, Taoiseach, if you had a chance to watch Prime Time last night. If you didn't, I'd urge you to watch it back. You would have heard from Erica, a secondary school teacher. Her husband's an SNA, they have a young daughter, they're renters, they're a working couple trying to build a good life and a future. But the pressure they're under just to get by, to pay the rent, keep the car on the road, meet their bills, is just incredible. Erica said they'd love to have a second child, but they currently see no hope of that. They wonder now if they'll have to leave Ireland to have any chance. Her story and circumstances are reflected right across the state. And when she was told that she'd be down money as a result of your budget, you could sense her heartbreak. She was close to tears. You see, how can you take money from her when she already doesn't have enough to get by? These are the people Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have betrayed and abandoned in your budget. Tá stanga buinse as ibrahine tíre nach bhfuil in-ann war muséad a creidúint. Buséad a réigean ibrithe agus teaghlaí tá fóga níos massa as ná mar a bhí ribhe. Taoiseach, ordinary people are asking, when do they get rewarded and recognised for their hard work? When do they get their fair share? Because you're not giving it in your budget. Do you even recognise the hurt and anger that working people are feeling today? Why did you choose deliberately to deliver a budget that leaves them worse off?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, a dúspáir ní aontaí manécha leis an méid atá láite ag an teachta agus nó multaí bhí go hain agus an polisathe atá go modar leis an cánisné seo ná go mbeidh an costas marachtála ag dul níos arda dá mar rud go mbeidh polisa Sinn Féin curtha a bhaim. The bottom line is, if you look at the Sinn Féin's alternative budget, and it's not my calculation, if you look at the central bank's formula in terms of what you're spending, 13.4 billion. In fact, if you add more in terms of your once-off measures, your budget would add 2.5% to the cost of living, to inflation. That, it is absolutely true. And you have been going on all last month, you've been going on about the cost of living your budget, and if you look at the central bank's formula for determining this, would have put up inflation and the cost of living by 2.5%. Now, what I would say to you is this. Workers in this country want better water services, want more houses, want better public transport, want more roads and better connectivity in terms of roads, better education services, better health services, and you've gone full circle. You've gone full circle. I never thought I'd hear the day when the Sinn Féin leader would be quoting the Fine Gael election mantra about it's for those who get up early in the morning. I mean, that was one time a slogan that you decried and you would have condemned in your day. And the point is this, we decided that we would invest in the future of working people in this country, that we would protect the jobs that we have and then invest to make sure we have the jobs of tomorrow, through investment in research and development, through investment in energy, water, public transport, roads, and so forth. And we're doing that. And that's what will underpin workers in their jobs. And this is the first of 5 budgets. And we will be working on our taxation commitments in future budgets in respect of those who are working, as we did in previous budgets. But we also said we would prioritise child poverty. And this is a very progressive budget. Yes, because if you look at the SRI's switch model, they're saying the 2 lowest income deciles get the most from this budget, and a significant amount relative to others. That's what this budget is doing. And I was determined to do it, and I said it in the House we would do it, and it's the beginning of a process to get consistent poverty down, particularly among children. And also, and if you look at, in terms of the child support payment, it's very, very significant. In terms of the over 12 going up by €16, the under 12 by €8. That will benefit about 330,000 children in this country. And it's moving in the direction of a second tier in terms of supporting those most in need. So for children, the €16 is now about 4,000 per annum now. That's the amount for a child in the family in the support payment now. That's significant. 3,000 for those of under 12. And then in terms of the carers, it's a record 60% increase in the carers allowance, weekly income disregard. And that's very significant, going from 375 to 1,000. And a single carer can now earn just over 54,000 per year and receive a full carer's payment. Income disregard for a couple increased by 750 to 2,000. And that's there for a person who's caring in a household where their partner ends up to 108,000 will receive a full carer's payment. These are the largest ever increases in the carer's income disregard. And in terms of disability, there's very substantial funding gone into the disability budget, plus the domiciliary care allowance is up very significantly. And I did say in the election, the enterprise economy, infrastructure, child poverty and disability were my priorities.
So whatever about me borrowing the phrase, well spotted from Fine Gael, about those who get up early in the morning, they've clearly forgotten about them as well. The more astonishing thing is that Fianna Fáil, hook, line and sinker, all like nodding wee dogs, going along with the Fine Gael agenda. Incredible. Incredible. Who would have thought? But there you go. I tell you what workers want, Taoiseach. They don't want to listen to your bluster. They want to be able to pay their bills. They want to be able to feed their children. They want to be able to run their homes. Erica wants to have a second child, but that's not on the cards. Erica and her family don't want to be forced out of Ireland like so many others to try and have a chance and an opportunity in their lives. You promised a lot at the general election. It's clear now that elections are where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael make their promises and budgets are where you break them. You told me only a few short weeks ago, and let me quote it to you, you said that you would do what we can on taxation to alleviate the pressure on people. Now, no one took that to mean landlords and developers. We thought you meant working people. We thought you meant people who generate all of these billions in surpluses. So can you explain again to the working people of Ireland how you arrived at a decision to spend €9.4 billion and leave them worse worse
Taoiseach
off.
to
Explain
respond.
that,
Now
Taoiseach,
the
please.
Taoiseach is to respond.
There are tens of thousands of people in this country working in cafes and restaurants throughout the length and breadth of the country. They're workers. It's an industry under pressure.
Please, you asked for a response,
Studies showed that increased labour costs did impact on those businesses. And I think you should not be so dismissive of the hospitality sector as you are in your commentary. And likewise in terms of housing. We do need to narrow the viability gap. You're all bluff and bluster about housing. But any time a solution that can contribute to housing, you just knock it and condemn it, and you sloganise, oh, it's a tax break for developers. It is not. It is not. What it's about, is trying. I did not interrupt you, Deputy. I did not interrupt your leader, Deputy Doherty. I didn't interrupt your leader. And I think you should stop heckling and shouting and being Mr. Angry all the time. The bottom line is this: housing.
Time is up, Taoiseach. Time is up, Taoiseach. Thank you. There's no point.
Well,
Taoiseach, Deputy Ivana Bacik. Deputy Ivana Bacik. Your leader's question, Deputy. Thank you, Taoiseach. Taoiseach, time is up. They don't want to listen, Taoiseach. They didn't allow you to speak. You didn't allow the answer. It's Taoiseach. The point is that. Well,
I think we need fairness.
there is fairness. If they're not prepared to answer within the time, they're not prepared to listen, Taoiseach, in the same way they don't accept it. Deputy Ivana Bacik, please take your question. Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Bacik.
Gurmahagad Can Corla. Taoiseach, yesterday's budget, Taoiseach, was a deep disappointment. It was a deep disappointment. There's real anger out there, Taoiseach. You made choices in this budget that are impacting really adversely on so many people. As my colleague Deputy Jed Nash has said, in what was, I think, the line of the day yesterday, this was a budget that is giving handouts to burger barons and to big builders, but broken promises for everyone else. And people see that, and this is raw. Students facing a €500 fee increase. Parents seeing no reduction in childcare costs when they can get a childcare place. Families struggling with the cost of living crisis, and people unable to find a home of their own. And of course, nothing for disabled people or for carers. Taoiseach, this was derisory for those. Here in Ireland, employment rates for people with disabilities are 20% lower than the European average. 1 in 5 people unable to work due to disability live in consistent poverty. Our social protection system has to intervene, and there was great hope of significant intervention in this budget. Taoiseach, supports like the Disability Allowance and Disability Support Grant are essentials, covering costs in heating, in food, in medication and rent, funding day-to-day expenses of disabled people and of carers in an inaccessible society. But the removal of one-off support payments in your budget is expected to cost disabled people, Taoiseach, €1,400 a year. That's not loose change, it's money that keeps the lights on. By contrast, Labour in government would introduce a cost of disability payment, starting at €25 per week, to help meaningfully offset the costs of disability. Our Labour alternative budget, published last week, proposed a 50% increase in housing adaptation grant funding to ease the burden of making a home accessible. Taoiseach, your budget could have taken steps like these to provide transformations in the lives of disabled people, but you left them out. You failed to introduce a cost of disability payment. You ended one-off payments and you introduced nothing new. Now, in respect of carers, we do welcome the increase in the carers allowance disregard. Indeed, that's something that we, and in particular my colleague Deputy Mark Wall, had been campaigning on for years. But what's missing is progress on abolishing the mean-spirited means test. It's a broken promise, because where's the pathway to abolition that was committed to in your programme for government less than a year ago? A €10 rise in core payments is derisory, Taoiseach. It amounts to an hourly increase of less than 6 cents for someone providing 24-hour care, and yet more than 2/3 of caring families struggling to cover the cost of food and energy in a cost of living crisis. So, Taoiseach, you failed disabled people and carers in this budget, and that's really evident. And it's a very significant broken promise in a litany of broken promises in a budget that is a do-nothing budget for far too many.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I have to disagree, Deputy, because in terms of the commitments we made in the election, we're following through on them very clearly in this budget. And you avoided the whole area of child poverty, which we should welcome, the moves. We have to do more. But there's very 300 million package alone for the lowest income. And look at the objective assessment. And as a Labour Party, you should acknowledge it, that the two lowest income deciles will benefit the most from this budget. And that's the reality. In terms of disability, there are significant increases in a range of payments, particularly disability pension, but also in terms of the domiciliary care allowance, which is going up a further €20 on top of last year's increase. And that's right and proper. And there is work underway in respect of the cost of disability. But we have made there's a huge increase in the disability budget this year. I think it's in the order of 20% increase in disability budget in terms of the services for people with disabilities. And that's right and proper. And we're going to continue to prioritise disability and child poverty, but also in terms of infrastructure. Like you look at the education investment in terms of more schools, that affects workers. They want their children to have access to education services. The capitation grants are going up by record levels in terms of the primary and €20 in post-primary. They're very, very significant on top of the increases we've had in previous years. And that's all recognising the impact of the cost of living on schools and services. We have a rising population and we have an infrastructure deficit. And the workers of this country need their jobs protected, and we need to be creating new types of jobs for the future. And that is going to happen because of the investment we've committed to, which is more long-term. We're doing it in building the roads, the hospitals, the schools, and in terms of investment in research and development. We did a lot in the late 1990s, early 2000s in research, which laid the foundations for jobs that we have today, high-quality, high-value jobs, both in foreign direct investment and in terms of the domestic economy. The measures in the budget on the taxation side for R&D, and in terms of what Minister Lawless has in his budget, and the NDP, which is very much enhanced, will make a significant step change in terms of research in this country. And that guarantees jobs in the future. It doesn't guarantee votes in the short term, by the way, but it's the right thing to do for the country. The right thing to do. And I'm trying to move away from short-termism. And in this first budget, we want to lay foundations that will sustain the economy. No, I said during the election, Deputy Murphy, that I wanted to maintain the enterprise economic model that we have, which you resolutely opposed.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And that was a big choice in the election.
Time is up.
And
Thank
people
you, Taoiseach.
voted accordingly in
Deputy
terms of that
Bacik.
fundamental principle.
Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, certainly in last year's budget there was a very different approach taken, a giveaway budget to buy people's votes. This year you've made very different choices. And let's be clear about those choices. You referenced child poverty, and we in Labour put forward last week a children's budget, a costed set of proposals that would have made meaningful steps to tackling the scourge of child poverty and child homelessness. In your budget speeches yesterday, your minister's speeches, no reference to homelessness, no reference to the shocking figure of 5,000 children in homelessness, no reference to the proposal to introduce a second tier of child benefit, a really meaningful way in which we could have tackled child poverty. As Deputy Marie Sherlock has said, this could have been the game changer for children and child poverty. Instead, you've chosen to give over €600 million in a giveaway, a whopper of a giveaway, for big fast food chains, for big business in the hospitality sector. That's a choice you made. We in Labour, uniquely in our manifesto last year, did not make that choice. We stood against that sort of crazy VAT cut, and we did not stand for narrowing the tax base. We stand for decent public services, tackling child poverty and homelessness.
That's why we've invested in public services. This is a €9.4 billion budget. A lot of economists are saying it's too high, that we shouldn't be expending as much as we're spending. So a lot of economists are saying to us, no, we disagree. We think that the expenditure increase is in line with the basic premise of an expenditure rule, that this represents real growth of the economy and change in price levels. So that's the government's position. But it is very substantial investment in public services. And on the second tier, some of the models for second tier would result in thousands of children losing out. So what we've opted to do in a more straightforward way is to substantially and unprecedentedly, in terms of the scale of increases, which Minister Cleary put forward, was to increase the child support payment. And it is quite substantial. And we'll grow that, and de facto, you essentially have, in time, a second tier. I think that's the most straightforward and simple way to do it, and it will be very impactful.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And then in terms of education and health services and disability services, there are substantial increases.
Thank you.
Way above the rate of inflation
Deputy,
for services.
thank you. Deputy Holly Cairns.
Taoiseach, I shouldn't be surprised by this government's approach to the budget. Time and time again, we've seen Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael's approach to these things. It's just that no matter what, it's really hard to understand how, at a time when the number of children living in consistent poverty doubled last year, you chose not to introduce a second tier of child benefit. I can't, for the life of me, understand why, after all of your election promises, you didn't introduce a weekly cost of disability payment, and it is just astounding that on budget day, the Minister for Finance failed to even mention the 16,000 people living in homelessness. Despite the fact that similar happens every year, I have to say I am still surprised. I am still shocked, and I am still devastated that year after year, the opportunity to address these issues is there. It is within reach, and it is wasted. It is particularly devastating when the government is awash with cash. Government spending has soared from 70 billion in 2020 to nearly 120 billion now, and what do we have to show for it? A worsening housing crisis, threadbare disability services, and rising child poverty. Ceann Comhairle, this budget can be summed up quite simply: broken promises, missed opportunities, and completely crazy priorities. Anyone examining it would think the cost of living crisis is being most acutely felt by developers and fast food chains. Millions going to the likes of McDonald's instead of lifting thousands of children out of poverty. 568 million in tax cuts for developers, when less than half of that would be enough to introduce a weekly cost of disability payment. Taoiseach, when we call for these measures, we get the usual response from your government: oh, we can't do everything, that would be financially irresponsible, etc., etc. What is truly irresponsible is how you are playing fast and loose with the country's finances, and the devastating consequences of that. The government has narrowed the tax base by 1.3 billion, making our economy even more reliant on corporation taxes, further privatising our public services by stealth. Everywhere you look, you see the waste of taxpayers' money on a government ideology that thinks the market is king. And you somehow still can't seem to see the damage that this approach is causing. If further discrimination against disabled people, record levels of homelessness, and constant increases in child poverty isn't a wake-up call for you, I don't think there will be one.
Taoiseach.
Like I said, I'm surprised, but I shouldn't be. So, Ceann Comhairle, all I can say is I hope people will judge this government on their actions, not their empty words in the lead up to the election. So, Taoiseach, my question is about one of those promises. Why didn't you introduce a weekly cost of disability payment?
Could I first of all say, it's not a question about we can't do everything. We have provided very effective measures on child poverty in this budget, which you seem to have deliberately ignored. The child support payment is a weekly increase of €16 to 78 for children aged 12 and over. That's up to 4,000 now and 56 per annum. And there's a child support weekly increase of €8 to 58 for children under 12. That's up to 3,000 per annum. There's an increase of €10 in all core welfare rates, a €60 increase in weekly income thresholds for working family payment for all family sizes. Families getting the working family payment will qualify for fuel allowance, €5 increase in fuel allowance per week from January, and then you have the back to school clothing and footwear allowance rate of children extended to children aged 2 and 3 who are eligible for this allowance, and that's a whole series of measures which cumulatively will make an impact on consistent poverty. That's why we prioritised it. in this budget. And in terms of the disability budget, there's a 20% increase in the allocation to core services. In respect to housing, there's a very significant lift for the homeless, for homelessness. And the Minister saw it, Minister Brown did. And the increase in allocation to enable 10,000 houses to be built, as opposed to any additional lease and so on, is very significant also. And with respect, you cannot say it's about market is king in terms of housing, because the government is the biggest single investor in housing at the moment. But where I disagree with you is this, that if we want to get to 50,000 houses, you will need the private sector involved. You will. And there's a tendency in the opposition to decry builders or to decry people who are going to have to build the houses. And the bottom line is this: we have a problem with viability on apartments. That's well known. We have 40,000 out there with planning permissions, but they're not being built because the argument has been that they cannot be built at a cost that would make it affordable for people to buy. So a number of measures that the Minister has taken, in addition to the VAT, that combined will endeavour us to get apartments built. But we do need the private sector in to complement what the state is doing. So the market is not king in accordance with my philosophy, because in the last 4 to 5 years we've substantially increased the state's investment in housing, and this budget does so again with very significant increases. But if we want to get to the level we want to get to, we absolutely have to have a combination of public sector investment in housing along with private sector investment in housing. Your policies have, in our view, would shut out completely private sector contribution to the housing issue. On the cost of disability payment, the Minister, as I said, we took steps to enhance by 20% the disability allocation, but also the domiciliary care allowance is going up €20 per month, which will be important for those families.
How much you ignore disability in your reply is kind of just representative of how much it's been ignored in the budget. The Disability Federation of Ireland have said it too. You don't have to take my word for it. They describe the budget as a betrayal of disabled people, stripping away vital supports and deepening poverty. And Taoiseach, I do recognise that there was increased funding in the budget for disability, but the Disability Minister herself said the department was coming from a low funding base. And I have to say that that is the understatement of the year. Services for disability have been starved for far too long now, so bringing it up ever so slightly isn't going to make a dent. You know that, I know that, disabled people all over the country know that. And you're trying to defend it and make excuses. And I have to say that your excuses are not going to pay for the added cost that people face every day of having a disability in Ireland. The lowest employment rates in the EU, threadbare services. We still haven't seen a reintroduction of motorised transport grant that was scrapped nearly 2 decades ago.
Thank you, Deputy.
So Taoiseach, I'm going to ask you again, will you reconsider introducing a cost of disability payment to recognise the cost of having a disability in this country?
Thank you.
Just very quickly, for 177,000 people on disability allowance will get an extra 520 minimum in 2026. It's a 618 million increase in the disability budget. That's not a minor amount. It's a very significant increase. And by the way, last year, you supported a VAT reduction on hospitality. You did. And you come here today and say you're all against it. And you voted against last night. You actually did. You said hospitality should be split between accommodation and food for 9% VAT rate.
Please.
On the 9th of November, that's the statement you said.
Allow
and you come in here today, and attack the government for doing what you asked us to do last year. Now, Deputy, that's inconsistent.
One voice, please.
I could use worse language to describe it, I won't do that. But I have to say to you that what is essential for this country is that we invest in our future. And that is what we're doing. We have the capital budget is very significant here.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
In terms of roads, energy, and in terms of housing.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
We've allocated
Time is up,
Taoiseach.
Thank you. Deputy Ken O'Flynn.
Thank you, Cairns. Taoiseach, after listening to you and your government speak about balance, growth and fiscal responsibility, I have to ask whose balance, whose growth and whose responsibility? Because the ordinary worker and the small business owner feel that this budget has punished their effort for good honest day's work. From the vintner, pub owner, to the shopkeeper in Mallow, who has watched their electricity bills almost double, to the self-employed electrician in Mayfield who rang me last night, who hasn't had a day's sick pay in 22 years. To the family driving from Denville into Cork City every morning, now facing an increase of the carbon tax on top of the VAT, excise and already fuel prices, one of the highest fuel prices that the state has seen. These are the people who pay their way, Taoiseach. These are the people that don't ask for handouts. They just want a little bit of fairness. Yet this budget rewards the biggest and the best that are connected: multinationals, developers, departments with new investments, 1.6 billion allocated to a contingency fund for IPAS, and not one cut to the inflated NGO sector. But the workers who keep Ireland moving, who are left with the highest cost and shrinking take-home pay and no relief in sight. You talk about fiscal disciplines, but there is nothing disciplined about punishing those who get up and work. You talk about compassion. There is nothing compassionate about ignoring those who pull up the shutters at 6 a.m. in the morning to keep the lights on in their business, struggling and worrying how will they pay the staff on a Friday afternoon. This government calls it balanced, but the scales in this government are fixed. They're fixed in favour of bureaucracy, and they're fixed against the backbone of our country. So let me put these questions directly to you, Taoiseach. First, do you justify giving new incentives to large corporations while self-employed and tradesmen and small shopkeepers are barely surviving? Secondly, will this government stop treating workers and the people that are funded as a funding source for everyone else in this state and reward them for their effort of getting up and working? And do you accept that the so-called green taxes that have become a double tax on rural communities in Ireland, people who have no train to take, who have no bus to catch and have no choice but to drive? Because, Taoiseach, fairness is not just a slogan. Fairness is when people get up early, work hard and play by the rules and do not get punished for it. Right now, this government, I would say, is not playing fair, and fairness is well and truly gone.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thank you, dear Deputy. First of all, the VAT cut for the hospitality sector overwhelmingly is a support for small businesses and for the businesses you talked about in Mallow and in Glenville. And I'm sure Deputy or Minister Christopher Sullivan could tell you about the impact on West Cork in terms of the cut in hospitality, which your colleague Deputy Collins sought as well. I mean, you need to be consistent now. And you know, right throughout West Cork, there'll be many cafes and restaurants thrilled with that decision, because it will underpin jobs in those areas throughout. And the other point I have to make is that people are going about fast food chains and McDonald's. These are all franchises. These are local people. Just because you see McDonald's or Burger, it's local people. It's employing young people and so on, and that's what we're talking. We're not talking about money for the big chains. We're talking about franchises.
Please.
You wouldn't know much about it, Deputy Murphy, because you just don't believe in business or enterprise or anything like that. And also,
a leader's question
we've kept the
to
VAT,
another
the
leader.
exemption on electricity and gas. We're keeping it at 9%. That's a help to people. If it went back up, it would be a significant burden on people. And we have chosen, Deputy, to invest strongly in public service, which will benefit everybody. And I think if you look and talk to people, I accept, and there's 5 budgets to come. We did a lot on taxation over the last 3 years, and we will do more in the budgets to come as well in respect of taxation. But given what's happening in the in the world, in the United States, and tariffs and so on like that, we do need to protect jobs that we have now and into the future, and we do need to invest in infrastructure because the population is increasing significantly. And in terms of the carbon tax, which, in overall scheme of things, if we had done the VAT, for example, if we allowed VAT go to 13, that would be big for people's gas and electricity bills. But equally, the revenue from carbon tax does help those in fuel poverty, helps us to have the biggest programme ever in retrofitting housing, which benefits workers and benefits middle-income families. That's a very important retrofitting programme. It couldn't be financed otherwise in any sustainable business. And it also helps farmers in terms of environmental farming schemes. And if you took that funding away now, it would leave an enormous hole in the budget that would not fund what is desirable. No, you might disagree with me. I think climate is an issue that needs to be addressed. I genuinely do. and we can't ignore it, and that is why I support it. And we have to agree to disagree on that. In terms of working families, and particularly low-income working families, this budget does a lot. Okay, it can't do everything in one budget, but on the core issues of infrastructure, disability, child poverty, it makes very serious inroads. And then in education and health, likewise.
Deputy Flynn.
Taoiseach, people are tired of being told. They're tired of being told that they're better off than they were. That the truth is they're not. I don't know when the last time you walked into Lidl or Aldi or into the local supermarket to Dunn's to do your shopping and you looked into your basket and you paid your bill and you said, in the name of God, what did I buy? That's the reality of people's lives today. And I don't know when you last did that, or perhaps your housekeeper does it for you. I don't know. But look,
One
but
voice.
look, in fairness,
Sorry.
but we talk about fairness. You froze the tax band, you've raised the fuel cost, and you've left families carrying the load. You haven't answered the question about the toughness that's on society, the difficulty that men and women have rearing children now, picking. You know what they're biggest afraid of? They're afraid of the postman's knock. They're afraid of the next bill that's coming through the door. They're afraid that they're doing everything right, and they're wondering to themselves, what and why am I being punished by this government? The workers and the shopkeepers from Ballincollig paying €2 extra on a litre of fuel. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Really, I don't have any housekeeper, and never had. But could I say that I do shop every week myself? Okay, no big deal. Douglas Market, English Market. I have my routine. And the price of food has gone up significantly. And I acknowledge that. And that is why we decided to target those on the lowest incomes. And that's why we took a deliberate decision. I find it, and I said this before in the House, all the left-wing parties want us to do universal payments. I'm not saying you're left. They all want us to do universal payments. There was a time that those on the left-wing would have favoured targeting. Like Fianna Fáil always had a social conscience. We're along with Fine Gael and the independent parties, the three in government, the independents and ourselves, we said, we want to prioritise investment in infrastructure. We want to really look after disability, not just in terms of the core disability service, but education as well, in terms of places, and to make sure we have a system where every child who needs a place will have it in September.
Taoiseach.
And also in terms of SNAs and so on, which all are provided for. Public services help everybody, workers as well as non-workers. That's an important principle we shouldn't lose sight of.
We now move to other members' questions. Deputy Erin McGrath.